Good evening. We have put the same title this week as we used last week because it just felt like a really nice group, and I've had lots of different feedback and people said they really enjoyed it. And we really enjoyed that it was actually more interactive because we get pretty bored of our own voices. So for people who weren't with us last week, we'd called it The Power of Love. And then different people shared stories about how almost like through understanding, they've started to come from a place of love and how that's changed their interactions and changed how life shows up for them. And it was kind of building on a theme from my favourite Buja Buja quote, which is, I have to mention Buja Buja every week. Buja Buja. I do love Buja Buja.
Kelly took notice once.
She did.
She was very good.
And she even remembered my favourite flavour. Love when
Mine
everything...
champagne.
Love when everything is pressing you to be less. And I think it's been so interesting recently. We've had so many different conversations with people and one-to-ones where it seems like at the moment, there's always something, but at the moment people are coming a lot with a justified reason to be angry and negative and fearful and not love. And there's a lot of ideas of division and separation. So I've seen it as an opportunity that every time I'm feeling righteous and not in that space, to get reflective about me rather than looking out. And I think we're so used to looking out and blaming, but it's almost I've seen as an opportunity to look within, like, what does this say about me? So we kind of touched on that last week, but it was just nice that we got to hear from people, because so many people then private messaged each other and sent me messages about when they explained it like that, then it hit me. And like, I know, Paul, when you spoke, we had so much lovely feedback from what you shared. And for somebody who finds it very difficult to share within groups, the fact that you just show up and as you are, whether or not you've been in a good mood or a bad mood, it resonates with people and it gives them a permission to share. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
To what, about Paul?
That group or Paul or anything.
About Paul.
What do you want to say about Paul? I'm still waiting for the photo of you with a weird moustache. Last week I was screenshotting Paul because it looked like he had like a black moustache, the way that the camera was. So he was going to send me some photos apparently where he did have a really good moustache.
Yeah, Claire just said she's got some good ones of me handlebar tash, so she'll send them on. It stemmed from some guys taking the piss about us being ginger on a building site. And, you know, I rose to the challenge and thought the best thing to do is to irritate them by having this massive splendid handlebar moustache. And then the best thing was about the three guys on site started growing handlebar tashes as well. So it was, yeah, good times. Yeah, trendsetter.
Cool lad. Standing up for the ginger lads. That's good. Yeah.
Lisa's finished her tea.
Lisa stopped eating. Good. I think at this time, I think it's a really disorientating time for many people. I'm quite a fan of disorientation. I always remember when I was seeing Sue, the lady who introduced me to Sydney Banks and the principles. I always remember saying to her, "I'm confused," and she went, "Good." She used to say, "Good." We don't like being confused in life because we like to know. You know, there's a safety in knowing. It seems like there's a real safety in knowing. People don't like the unfamiliar, generally. People being very generalistic now, but en masse, generally, people don't like the unfamiliar. People like the status quo to stay the same. But the most guaranteed thing in life is change. That's just the nature of life. It's the nature of this planet. It's the nature of the universe. Everything is continuously in a constant state of change. No one situation sits around forever. It's always changing. It comes and goes. Everything has its time. Everything has its time. Coronavirus will have its time. And I think a lot of the suffering in the world at the moment is just created from a real uncertainty. Fear. And I know myself, I mean, I've been kind of dragged into this a little bit from time to time. A few months ago, I got quite dragged into it. Started listening to people and people were telling me stuff and I was like, fucking hell. I really lost my bearings on life. A grounding, I suppose, and a bearing that I had since 2013. So this was quite a new challenge for me personally. It was quite a new challenge to face this kind of upheaval and this kind of sense of suffering, worry and anxiety. And that has been a real gift. Who was I speaking to today? I was speaking to somebody today about the gift of stress, the gift of suffering. It's the one thing that people don't want to go through is suffering. Nobody wants to go through. Of course, nobody wants. Of course, we don't want to go through suffering. It's logical. But when I look back at my life personally, and I think when I ask clients, you know, your hard times you faced in your life, the stressful times, would you remove them from your history now? I don't think I've had a single person who said yes. None that I can think of. Everybody has just gone, no, I wouldn't remove that. I wouldn't remove that hard time now. No, no, absolutely not. Why not? Well, because it's brought me to where I am now. On the other side of it, there was beauty. And there was learning, and I met such and such a person, and I ended up here, and I got to do this, and I did that. And I think that's what the world's going through now. And it's been a real time for me personally of grounding, to be able to settle myself back in. Stripey sisters. And I think one of the things I had to do was I had to go back. I had to kind of step back and remember what was it that changed my life? And it was love. You know, you read about it in the Bible, and you hear about it in church, and you hear about people who find this divine love, and you're like, yeah, whatever. It's a nice story. It's a nice story, isn't it? It's a really nice story. But if that divine love shows itself within you at some point, and I know it's shown itself to people on this screen that I'm looking at now, this isn't something that's reserved for special people. It's reserved for everybody, because it is just what is. It's like when that divine love starts to, and this is what this conversation is about ultimately, it's about the cultivation of creator. When I say cultivation of creator, that's not the right sentence. It's about the recognition of it. The principles, as Sid Banks spoke about, were the recognition of the creative force behind life. And it just so happens we do have words for these forces already in our vocabulary. They're nothing new. And it's the recognition that in the everyday life, we are that creative force. We are singularly creating the life that we experience. And then together creating the world. And this divine force, anybody who has this realization or realizes what they call them true self, anybody who realizes what they call God, anybody who realizes what they call the spiritual, whatever they want to call it, it really doesn't matter. They'll come back and they'll tell you it is the most inexplicably beautiful thing called love. You know, many people who have near-death experiences, they come back and they'll say, it's the most beautiful place on earth. It's just so full of love. But like anybody who realizes, I would keep making this point, anybody who realizes God, they don't realize it externally, they realize it within, like any other realization. And ultimately, that's all anybody's ever looking for. Everything we do is a step towards, striving towards finding this love, contentment, fulfillment in life, happiness, security in life. That's why we do everything we do. If you really look at your life closely, you'll realize that's why we do what we do. Whether we take that job, is that job going to bring me fulfillment, satisfaction, joy? Is the money going to bring me fulfillment, satisfaction, joy? Is that partner going to bring me fulfillment, satisfaction, joy? Is that holiday, whatever it is, the car, whatever, the gardening, poetry? You realize that everything that we are ultimately searching for, and this goes for every single human being on earth, is security, fulfillment, and joy and love. That's why we protect ourselves. That's why we put on our suits of armor and protect ourselves, because we want to protect that love and we don't want anything to come close to taking it away. That's why wars take place, because we live in the misunderstanding of love. And so to take that time and kind of get reflective and look back within myself and remember, there is a missing part that isn't obvious to humanity at the moment. It's coming. It's coming quickly as well. And that is the energetic, if you want to call it energetic, the spiritual, if you want to call it spiritual, unifying force that unifies all people and all things. It's not obvious because we live in a world of duality in the senses, but it's a fact. Science is pointing this out now. Science is realizing this, that everything is made of energy. They say everything's made of energy. And in the Bible it says God makes everything. Everything is God. You've got the two modalities aligning there, just not liking each other's words. But when we fall in love and we feel that connection, when that duality of separation, when you fall in love with somebody and that duality of separation just falls away, when the duality of separation falling away feels like connection, when you feel that connection to another person, to an animal, to a pet, to a place, to a piece of music, to a piece of literature, to a piece of artwork, that's the true nature of life showing itself in that moment. And I think what this has really taught me this last few months is that, you know, we walk around this world with many, many people, but we walk on our own. In our life. This is a dualistic statement, but here we are as human beings. It's like to be able to cultivate, like Jen said, what was your quote from Booja Booja?
Love when everything's pressing you to be less.
Yeah. To be able to take these challenges of life and to start to try and find peace and love within them. To start to try and find peace and love with what's going on in the world, with our personal situations, to start to try and find peace and love within them, because it's totally possible. Totally possible. Is our mission. Really, that's if we do have a purpose on this earth, it's to is to find love and to cultivate it and to grow it and to share it and to bring it into more people's lives and to help other people find it. Because if we really take a look at love, what will love do? With love, there's no suffering, there's no war, there's no greed, there's none of that stuff. So for me personally, this has been a real chance for me to step back, to look at myself, to look at my life, and to cultivate.
I read a great post by, I think it's Johnny Bowden, who's someone who shares the principles. And it was about how nothing's changed. So I think everyone at the moment is kind of like in the world, and we listen to the news, there's all these things that seem like change and restriction and all those things, but nothing's changed in the way our reality is created. So regardless of circumstance, regardless of the physical world, the way that we experience is still the same as it always has been. And I think that's where I think I've drawn comfort, because I've seen that regardless of kind of what's gone on in my life or the wider world, there is a place where I rest. And that was the thing I woke up to, which you're describing as like that inexplicable love. Like, I know that place exists. So regardless of anything external, we get to fall back into that. And I think we all find moments of that when, even if we're doing something we love. So regardless of what's going on in our lives, in that moment, we're so involved with what we're doing, everything else falls away. And it's like nothing else exists, because for us, it doesn't exist in that moment. And I think that was the good news I found with the principles, because I used to be so thrown around by life and so kind of thrown around by what was going on, and I had to manage my experience so much. Whereas now it's the recognition that everything we're looking for exists right now, regardless of what's going on. And the more that we see that, I think then the way that we show up in the world changes. Like, I know when Anne shared her story last week, and she said, when she stopped kind of caring from resentment and all those things, the way that then your ex-husband responded was that he settled, he rested, and he felt the change in you. So then the interaction was different, and you'd known that as a good idea for a long time, but until you had the insight and the realization, and I don't even know if you knew what that was, you couldn't help but come from that place when you were with him. And I think that's why I think you often say, as soon as we have a finger pointing outward, it's time to look inside. Because if we're blaming something for our experience or for how we feel, it's a brilliant moment, if we can see it, to get reflective. Because what's going on is only ever a reflection of our mind in terms of our experience of it. Kendra back in. And I think I would have said I knew this when I came across the principles, I think 16 years ago this year. And I've loved seeing how you can know something and then you can know it again and again and again. And you can think you've got life sussed and then be humbled by it. Because the amount of freedom and choice I found when I came across this, like, I would almost see myself getting into judgment and be like, why would I do that? Why would I live in an experience of judgment? Or I'd see myself wanting to react, but why would I do that? I'm the first recipient of what I think and feel. And then how life can just completely humble you. And you're like, I kind of know this has got something to do with my mind, but right now it totally looks like it's the outside world. And growing in respect for that within myself and within others. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Anna.
Oh, I don't know if she can hear you.
You speak.
No, I was just going to say, we said it was going to be interactive and we've just talked. But has anyone got any questions or comments from last week or anything they wanted us to talk more about or things they've noticed? And Mark, yes, this is live. Ruined his joke now. Lisa, have you turned your video on because you've got something wonderful to say?
I mean, I could sit here and see what comes out. I'm not going to sit here and see what comes out. I wish I hadn't realised what I realised about type 2 fun being when you've had a shit time and you look back on reflection and go, oh, it was brilliant. Because I went on the mountains today and it was really scary and really windy and really horrible. And I came back and went, God, that's awful. And it's the first time I've done that and not gone, God, that was brilliant.
You're honest with yourself.
Yeah. It was still, so I'm just going to lie on my bed and chill out.
You do that.
Nice to see you.
Mwah,
See you.
love you. I think when we look out at this world, it's not always instantly obvious for people. That's why we have this conversation. That's why I had to have this conversation. That's why I continue with this conversation. Because once you start to wake up to it, once you start to get a sense of the truth of the nature of reality, of the nature of beingness, it's like, it becomes such an interesting topic. It becomes quite, so many people come into this conversation, you know, and you see months later, years later, you still see these people sat there having these kind of conversations, because it's not because, I wouldn't say it's because they haven't found what they're looking for a lot of the time. I think it's because they know there's always more to see. One of the first steps to starting to live a beautiful life, because face it, that's why we're all here, because we all want to start to live beautiful lives, or perhaps we're having a beautiful life, we want to continue having a beautiful life. Perhaps we get tastes of a beautiful life and we go, I want more of that. One of the first things that can really help to do that is to start to see the nature of it. I always say this every single week, but it's that whole question. We all know that we are alive, but what is life? It's something that most people don't ponder. Because the moment you ponder that question, you become a searcher. If nobody's ever pondered that question, they're not a searcher. But the moment that question pops into your head and you take that question seriously, you instantly become a searcher, and it will be something that stays with you for the rest of your life. What is life? What is living? What is it to be alive? Why is it? What's it all about? How does it come about? I think for me, it was one of the things that truly, truly, truly changed my life was realizing the nature of thought, or beginning to realize the nature of thought. You know, it's really easy. We tend to think of thought as thinking, what I'm thinking, this thought, that thought, good thought, bad thought, right thought, wrong thought. I want to kind of bypass that and go beyond that. Rather than looking at thinking, which we're always doing. That's the thing that stresses us out. I have these thoughts. What about these thoughts? But what about these thoughts? But I have this thought, I have that thought. What about this thought? You're telling me that's a good thought? You see, we split this power of thought into good, bad, right, wrong, blah, blah, blah. But to start to get a sense of, rather than looking at what thought is doing, start to look at its nature.
I'm just going to get the laptop charger.
Oh, well done. Start to look at its nature. You know, I was quite a scientifically minded human being who just assumed that I knew what thought was. Something that, you know, is a product of the brain. The brain thinks. I had no idea that thought was ultimately a spiritual force. I had no idea that thought was the creative force. It's like everything you look at, every single thing that you look at around your house now originated in the mind. Everything that you look at, anything you can look at now originated in the mind. It had its origin in the creative power called thought. Every single thing. There's nothing that has ever come into this world without the power of thought. It's totally and utterly impossible for anything to come into this world without the power of thought. When I say that, I'm talking about all the human endeavors, all the things that we've strived to do, and we've achieved, all the things that are to come in the future. And it's so interesting how what comes into mind is completely and utterly linked to what our consciousness is, where our consciousness is. So, for example, in the Battle of Hastings, there was nobody thinking about Wi-Fi. There was nobody thinking about GPS. There was nobody thinking about digital. You know, those thoughts hadn't come to the people at that time because their consciousness wasn't evolved enough for them thoughts to come in. As people start to elevate, for want of a better word, in consciousness, new thinking starts to come to them. Old thinking starts to die away and new thinking starts to come to them. This is what Einstein was talking about when he said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Consciousness is absolutely fundamental to creation. Consciousness, the force of life, what we are, what life is. What is life? Life is a creative happening. It's an experiential event. And we go through all kinds of experiences. We go through the ups and downs of life. We go through the highs and the lows. And it can be really easy to separate them into highs and lows and goods and bads. But when we start to look at the power of thought, you realize it's all the same thing. You can start to get a sense of the fact that there is no right, wrong, good, bad, high, low. It's all the same thing. You know, when we think about reality, we tend to think of an external thing, an external event, which is as though we move through reality as we walk through the world. But in actual fact, reality moves through us. It's very different. It's that whole thing, whatever you're pointing at in the world and blaming it for our experience, for pissing us off, for upsetting us, for making us feel scared, that's our invitation to turn around and start to consider that perhaps the world doesn't exist like we think it does. The world only exists to us in our mind. Everybody sees a different world. No two people on the earth see the same earth. No two people see the same goodness, the same badness. No two people like the same music. No two people have the same thoughts. People can have similar thinking. There's two sisters on here now. You've got the same genetics, but you've got very different characteristics. Very different personalities. No, not really. But you have your own likes and your own dislikes. You have your own preferences. And when we start to, this is the bit, I can see why Sydney Banks called thought the missing link. Not what we think, but the power of thought. I can see why he called it the missing link. The missing link to sciences, the missing link in psychology, in religion, all these things, to life. Thought was the missing link. Because we spent forever looking at the material world, the material body. And then all of a sudden Sid comes along and goes, the power of thought is essential to start to understand. Is essential to understand. Because if you can start to gain insight into the power of thought, you will realize something. You will realize the creator. And you will realize that you are the creator. What's that saying? And ye shall all know that ye are gods, or something, it says in the Bible. Everybody is God. Everybody is a God of their world. They are the creator within their world. They create every single bit of experience. We want to blame our partner. We want to blame our ex for pissing us right off. But to start to gain understanding into that, no, that experience can only be brought about if I'm thinking pissed off. If I'm thinking he's pissing me off, so it appears. That's for somebody who we spoke to yesterday. Love you.
But also, I thought it was cool. Last week or the week before, Flick was saying how she's also seen that just because you see that you're the creator of your own experience, it doesn't mean you necessarily put yourself in the firing line of other people. And
No, certainly not.
you can totally see that someone else is living out of their own mind and have acceptance for that, but you don't necessarily choose to hang out with them. And it's like an empowering thing rather than a passive thing. And I think that's the distinction, because I think sometimes, and I know when I came across this, I almost felt, well, if I see this, then I could do any job, I could hang around with anybody. And it was like a very mechanical thing. Whereas now you start to find gratitude for the fact that you're the creator of your own experience, but you then also have this navigation within you, and it moves you sort of towards certain people and away from certain people, like, and it's all right. Whereas I used to think, no, I just have to like everyone, because if I see that it's just thought, then I could change my mind. And like, we're not talking about it in a logical way in that term. And I think that was helpful for me, because suddenly the judgment then comes out. But I know that then when there has been people in my life, and like we've had people before where you've gotten really well with them and I've found them really difficult, and to be able to take ownership of that and not blame it on them, but then not beat myself up. I'm like, man, it's just what's happening. And I think that's the thing. We're human beings, and it looks like things piss us off. But I think that the thing that you start to see is, well, can I have an experience of it without thought? Can I have an experience of it without consciousness? Like, I know that Mara Gleason, who shares this, she said the moment this really started to make sense to her was when her dad had been away on a business trip and come back really different. And he sat his two children down and apologised to them for how he'd been as a father. And he had started to change quite a lot. And he started to talk to her a bit about the principles, because she was thinking of going and doing psychology at university. And she said the moment it clicked for her is when she saw her dad's car pull up, and immediately she started feeling anxious. Like, what kind of mood's he going to be in? Her mind just started going, and she was feeling the stress of what she blamed normally on her dad. My dad makes me stressed. My dad makes me anxious. But she saw the fact he's not even in front of me. He's not even in the house. And I'm in the experience of this feeling. Like, how many times has that happened before? And she said that started the inquiry. Like, that for her was her first bit of evidence for the truth of something, that she could send herself into complete panic about her dad and how he's going to show up when he wasn't even there. So he wasn't physically with her. And then it's taken her then on a journey of sharing the principles, learning about the principles, spending a huge amount of time with Sydney Banks. But I absolutely love how she shares, but she said it was like she saw the moment where it became real for her rather than a good idea or a theory. Because otherwise it's just words, like, that sounds like a really nice idea. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. But it was the moment it kind of touched her on a real level, like in real time, she learned from her own experience. And I think that's what we always suggest for people is don't listen to what we say and try and weigh it up against whether you think it's true. Go away and learn from your own experience whether this is true. And people will often say, well, how is it that sometimes my partner or my kids do something and it really infuriates me? Other times I think it's funny. How can the same thing sometimes appear like no big deal and other times seem like the biggest deal? How can 5 loads of washing sometimes be the most overwhelming thing and other times you just get on and do it? Like, where is our experience of all life coming from? And I think the moment we inquire within, it settles us down because we're aligning with something that's already true. And I think when we're out of alignment is where we seem to struggle, because we are living in a fantasy, we're living in a make-believe, and we won't feel like we have any bearings there because it's not built from truth. It's false, but we have to see that for ourselves. So there's certain things where I can say, no, this has got something to do with thought, but it doesn't look like it, and I'm still going to blame that. And I've got so much peace around that now. I don't have to be perfect, but I'm also aware that at any moment I could see something fresh and new. And I think to know that insight and evolution and movement is built into us. Like Sid spoke about 3 principles, and I think the one he loved to kind of speak to was, he called it mind because he didn't want it to be religious, but this intelligent mind, this intelligence that is running the show, he used to say. And it knows how to live life. And we are that. So it takes it out of the personal, like it's the way plants grow. It's the way the seasons change. There's an order to things. There's an intelligence. Life knows what to do. When a seed is planted, it knows what to do. It's built into it as an intelligence, a force. And I think when we start to realize, well, we have that same intelligent force within us, with the ability to create a reality and walk through life, I think we stop thinking so much about our thinking, and we recognize that there's a source or a power behind it. Our thinking gets reordered. Because like so much of the stuff I've seen for myself, my mum told me when I was a teenager. And like when she used to try and tell me, oh, it doesn't matter what the people think. I'm like, yeah, it does. Totally matters what people think. But until you realise that for yourself and it no longer matters to you what people think of you, it will be your reality and it will matter to you. And she used to say, feel the fear and do it anyway. I was like, no, I don't want to feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm going to hide in my bedroom and not do that thing. But now I'm like, oh, okay, I can still feel really fearful, but I can still do something. Like there's a place when fear comes in, which is healthy and helpful. I'm not going to go and balance on the end of a cliff or anything. But most of the fear I have I know it's like, I did a Viva event the other day, which is a 3 principles event. And because I was one of the speakers, I had to take part in the games. And when my auntie told me, I was like, why did I agree to this? So then I had to dress up to disguise myself, which I just thought was the most embarrassing thing ever and didn't want to do it, but I did it anyway. And then we had to play charades and I had to act stuff out. And it's the sort of thing I would have just excused myself and not taken part. But I can handle feeling uncomfortable. Like feelings aren't indicators of what we should and shouldn't do. And the more that we recognize that, you see that the only thing we're ever limited by is our own mind. So like the new thought I've had recently is Adam Faye's given me her guitar after she's been away for 10 years or whatever. She's like, you can have my guitar. So I was like, I'm going to learn to play the guitar. I've always talked about it. I've always wanted to do it, but I've always thought I'm never going to be very good at it. And then she gave me the guitar. I'm like, why am I so special and different that I couldn't be good at the guitar? So then every day this week I've been practicing. I've got Rob giving me lessons. And it's like a new thought, suddenly a new possibility. Whereas since I started learning when I was about 10, I'm not going to be very good at this. I'm not going to be very good at this. I can't do this. And you see that our mind is a tricky one, because if we think it, consciousness brings it to life and it looks real. And then if we don't know to question it, then we live out of it. And I think this just gives us the opportunity again and again and again to think again and think again and think again. And then what comes from that is we learn. and we grow. And like Lisa's brilliant sometimes, because I'll be like, Lisa, can you help me with this? She goes, why don't you figure it out? And sometimes she does help me, and I do the same to Dave. I'll be, can you show me how to do it? Yeah, no, you figure it out. And then I really wanted to make a dream catcher, because Lisa has made some beautiful ones, and I was waiting for Dave to get off his call. I think with Dad actually, and I was like, I'm waiting for him to show me how to do it. And he's like, just try and do it yourself.
Just do it.
But you
I know,
see, like
listen.
I've made up, I don't know how to tie knots. I don't. Then I just looked it up. This actually looks quite easy. I'm going to do it, and I've made it.
It's beautiful.
The other one Lisa did with me is I can't. I'm not strong enough to do handstands. I can't do them. I've been told I can't do them. And then she goes, just have a go. And then I did a handstand. I was like, oh yeah, I totally can do them. You get my dream.
And then she absolutely nailed them so she could just stand on her hands, no problem.
Look at that.
Beautiful.
Isn't it clever?
You're right for me to read out, and what you've written, because it's to everyone. Didn't see private message. So I used to think that thought came from the brain, and recently I've questioned it with regards to dementia and my husband. My husband still gets the thoughts come through, but can't process them properly or react accordingly. He has high emotions, cries a lot because he's confused by his thoughts. So this is proof to me about what you say is true. I wish I could speak to try and explain more what I mean, but he's asleep next to me, so I don't want to wake him. Thanks, Ange.
Yeah. I think when we've lived in a really kind of limiting paradigm, it served its purpose because it's helped us learn about the body. It's helped us learn about physiology, which has been awesome. It served its time. It's had its purpose. It served its time. And now we're in a time to start to move beyond that. Again, en masse, because there have been people throughout time who've moved beyond it. But when you look at that, and people, well, we assume that thought comes from the brain because we can measure what the brain's doing. It's like it is simply an assumption that it is actually caused there. There's no proof that it's caused there by science. To this day, there is no proof. They've never found proof that it's caused by the brain. A thought is caused by the brain. Yet we still live with that idea and that paradigm that it's true on pretty much on a day-to-day basis for many people. But I think this is, for me, looking at the natural world has been a really beautiful thing. Nature as a teacher, because if you start to observe nature, you realize it's a deeply intelligent thing. Every single thing that you see is intelligently created as the human being. Here, Pete.
Can you hear my dad sneezing?
And it's like
Can I have a sneeze?
the whole notion of consciousness being a production of the brain. You only have to look at the plant kingdom. Look at the fungal kingdom. You won't find a brain in a fungus or a plant, but you will see something that is perfectly capable of adjusting itself to its environment. That's perfectly capable of making decisions, being aware of its surroundings, being aware of one another, being aware of pests, being aware of threat, being aware of drought, whatever it is. And they don't have a brain. But there is still the awareness and the behavior created. And so it's like if we've lived in this very dualistic time where everything has been separated, a very mechanical kind of Newtonian time, where everything is mechanical and made of hard stuff. And then 100 years ago, we entered into the quantum age, where I forget the hell it was now, did the double slit experiment. Some of you will be familiar with it, I'm sure, where he realized that consciousness is absolutely integral to reality, the physical world holding itself together. Without consciousness or the observer, that all there is just infinite potential. In the moment consciousness is placed, it doesn't matter what it's from, whether it's from a human or whether it's from a bacteria or a bird or a fish or whatever it be, a tree. The moment consciousness is observed, we literally observe the planet into being. We observe the universe into being. We observe the body into being. Now, this is something that has never been taught beyond, like, into the school system yet. It's not taught into the school system yet. Perhaps it's because we don't know enough about it. I don't know. But there is an integral part to consciousness and the way that the whole world and ourselves are actually manifest physically. It is literally observed into being. And this is where Albert Einstein fell short with quantum, because when he had a conversation with the person, two lads from Sweden, I think it was, did the double slit experiment. He said, "So you telling me that the moon doesn't exist unless I'm observing it into being," for want of better words? And they said, "Yeah, that's how it's looking. Yeah, the moon does not exist until we literally observe it into being. We consciously create it." And he said, "Well, I prefer to think that the moon exists even if I'm not looking at it." And so more and more of experiments have been going on throughout since that experiment. And the quantum theorists are coming back and saying, no, Albert Einstein was wrong. We have this situation where consciousness is literally creating everything that we see, everything that we feel, everything that we touch. We are literally living in a divine dream. Reality is a divine dream, a singular dream, playing itself out in multiples, creating as it goes. And whatever it thinks, it creates. Whatever it thinks, it creates. Whatever is in the dream manifests. This is quite a telling thing for people. You know, we felt powerless. We felt seriously powerless over our lives. You know, like people have had hold the strings and they pull the strings to our lives and our emotions and our realities. It doesn't work like that. We, with our free will, we have a free will. We have a free will to think. We have the freedom to think anything. We have the freedom of thought. We can go anywhere in thought. And whatever we think, however we think about it and truly believe in it, it will become our reality. It will become our experience. Whatever we truly kind of wholeheartedly, fully think will become our experience. That will be the experience that we live out of. This is the nature of reality. We are literally creating experience. Reality is an experience. You take away experience, there's no reality. And so when we start looking at that, you start to wake up and you start to realize, well, if that's true, then I can have any kind of life truly that I would like. And when we start to think along those lines, you start to feel this empowerment take place as you realign yourself. What is it somebody said? It doesn't take time, it takes alignment. Change does not take time, it takes alignment. When you start to align yourself with truth, when you start to align yourself with the way it is, with what you are. And first thing we must realize, we are not what we think we are. Anything that we've identified with, we are not that. Those are things we've acquired throughout life. Those are the things that get in our way. Our character, who are you, Dave? Well, I'm Dave, I'm an ex-tree surgeon, you know, I've done this, I've done that, and I share the principles, I'm a son, a fiance, blah, 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 brother, mate, whatever. These are all just stories. These are all just stories that we've adopted throughout time, and we've carried around like a weight on our back, quick to pull them out and tell people about it. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is all just stories. And I think when we start to wake up and stop looking at the stories, start to realize the stories are made up. Who we think we are. I'm shy. I'm this. I'm that. I'm whatever. Anxious. I'm an anxious person. I'm this kind of person. I'm a that kind of person. I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert. These are just made up. We've made that up, and then we've adopted it, and we've created a character out of it. But we were never that character. With the infinite potential to be anything. That's what we truly are. It's our identification with our belief, back to this belief statement, but it's our belief in the idea that we are something, we are somebody of a like this or like that. That's getting in our way of truly realizing who we are and what life truly is. Because if you realize who you are, you will realize what life truly is. The moment you realize what life truly is, you will realize who you truly are. Life is a divine event. You are a divine event. You are that. Everybody is it. Everything is it. A singular force creating, I've heard it described in some religious text somewhere, that it's like the sun. With all the rays of the sun, each person is like a ray coming out of the sun. All the trees are like a ray coming out of the sun, all the fungus, all the bacteria, all the grass. This is an infinite thing going on. And as things are coming out of the sun, things are going back into the sun, recycled in an energy that never dies. Cannot die. It cannot die. Because it doesn't exist in the realms of the physical three-dimensional world that we see in the world of form. It creates it. We see life, birth, life, and death. It is birth, life, and death. It doesn't recognize any of them. It's just what's going on. It's all the same thing. We think we die when we die. We've come to the conclusion that life is the end. Like one of my favorite quotes by Jesus was, tell us how our end will be. Jesus, tell us how our end will be. And he said, I take it from your question, you found the beginning, that you ask me about the end. Blessed is the man who takes his place in the beginning, for he will know the end and will not taste death. If somebody finds the beginning, they'll know that there is no death. Death's the illusion of the passing. It's the leaving of the physical. It's the shedding of the body. What are you inside this body, looking out and moving it about? You see, it's a question that to our logic cannot be quantified. It's like we try and figure it out, and it's like it comes back with a few answers and then goes, I don't fucking know. When you start to look at what is it that's animating the body? What's the force? What's the energy? You'll realize there is a spirit. There is a spirit. You'll realize another dimension of being in that moment. You'll start to wake up to another dimension of reality. It's always been there. It's not been hiding from us. We just haven't realized it. You wake up to new dimensions, but the only place you will ever wake up to a new dimension is within consciousness, within yourself. And this is what's happening for people. People are waking up to new dimensions of reality now. More and more people now, en masse, we're starting to wake up to more and more dimensions of reality, but these realities are here and now within our being. We are that. That's what we are. We have the capacity to create heaven and hell for ourselves, but it's only ever for ourselves. We are that force that is animating life, that is creating life, that is creating the heaven, whether we're creating heaven, whether we're creating anxiety, whether we're creating anger, or whether we're creating hell, whatever you want to call it. When you start to look within and start to look at the thing that is animating the life, animating the body, animating the experience, you realize it's all the same thing. And there's no more powerful place to start to look than within yourself. We always think the power lies in other people, in money and in positions of power, in politicians and stuff like that. It doesn't. It lies in consciousness. No individual. I hear you too. No individual. No group of rich people. No group of politicians. Doesn't matter how big, is greater than the power of consciousness. And there are people on this world now wanting to change this world. I want to see a different world. And many people are going out and fighting. Well, if we fight, we're just feeding the same thing that we're wanting to try and get rid of. What we most find is love. It seems so counterintuitive to human beings that have fought their way through everything to suddenly start to come to the point of, what if I choose love? What would that do? Oh no, I can't choose love, that's passive. Love's passive. No, it isn't. Love is the most powerful thing in the universe. Love is where all the separation suddenly collapses into one. If everything is one, there is nothing to fight against. There's no war. How can you have a war in singleness? There is nothing to fight against. It's gone. And you realize the only thing we were ever fighting were thoughts. Thoughts of separation, thoughts of dualities, thoughts of us and thoughts of them. Thoughts of this world should be different. Thoughts of I want this, I want that. Whatever the thought be, the moment we step out of love, we'll create a duality and we'll create fear and we'll create something to fight against. Even our own mind. People go to war with their own mind. Many people do this. They'll have a thought and they'll go, oh, I don't want that thought. I don't want it. Oh God, why did I think that? So all of a sudden you've got this kind of thought war going on. People are fighting this thought, trying to fight this. If I fight this thought, I'll find peace. No, you fight a thought, you'll find war. You'll find war within your own mind. You cannot bomb your way to peace. You cannot fight your way to peace. Fighting our way to peace has never won. The only time peace has ever emerged is the moment everybody went, fuck this, I've had enough now, I'm stopping war. Stop. So we stop. We surrender, whatever. That's when peace emerges, when the war stops. It's not whilst we're bombing and fighting our way to it. And I think that's one of the kindest things when you start to realize we don't need to be afraid of our own creations. We don't need to be afraid of our own minds. Don't need to be afraid of thoughts. The thoughts. They mean nothing about us. Like I said before, whatever we think, we are not that. They're just misidentifications. And every single belief will create suffering one way or another. Even all our beautiful beliefs that we really hold on to and we really want to believe are good. They'll create suffering one way or another. It's not saying don't have beliefs, but it's just understanding the nature of it. The moment we have a thought and we believe it, we create this situation where we have something to defend. And I often use the example of you with your cards, because you always give cards to people, don't you, and say thank you. And then, because it sounds like a really nice belief, that's a really nice belief, really kind thing to do. But this one time you forgot to give somebody a card, and the suffering that you experienced for 2 weeks following it, I'm like, just send them a fucking text. Send them a text, please just send them a text. And so she sent this text, and what we got back was, oh, I didn't expect a card. No, it was just really nice to see you. Thank you so much. And thanks for your text. You see, even the kindest, what we think are the kindest beliefs, they cause suffering too. So to start to just become aware of this stuff, just to start to become aware of it, that's all that's needed. Because if you're not aware, you cannot know what you don't know. Unless you're aware of something, you cannot know it. It's like if somebody walks into the room behind you and you're not aware of them, they're not in your reality. They don't exist. It doesn't exist for you in your reality. It doesn't exist for you in your experience. The moment you become aware of it, you then have options what you can do. Throw them out, speak to them, offer them a cup of tea, whatever. And it is just that. It's just awareness. It's not, this was never talking about what to think or how to think. Yeah, you start to use your mind in a more wise way when you start to wake up to the nature of thought, because you start to realize what's important. And you start to realize that You don't always have to think the way you've always thought. You have new options. You have new possibilities for new realities within your life. That's a beautiful thing. Felicity.
Hello. Hello, Richard and Tricia. Nice to see you.
Hello, Rich and Tricia. Hi, Em as well.
My parents, everybody. I wanted to pick up on something that Jen said earlier, and actually I was talking about it with Adam this afternoon about feeling uncomfortable. So Jen was saying how you're happy now to feel uncomfortable, like it's not a big deal as it was. And I think we were saying earlier how that's one thing that's really helped with this understanding for me is I think before you have some really unpleasant thinking and then you just really want to fix it because you feel really horrible in your body, you feel really uncomfortable and it's not nice. So you have more thoughts and you go to war with yourself so you can try and fix the thought and feel better because you just want to not feel uncomfortable. You just have to get rid of the yucky feeling and that's your priority. Whereas now I've seen that I can feel uncomfortable, like, I don't know, angry or sad. And I know it's because of the thinking. And I know that, oh, I'm just having a human experience right now. I'm just feeling uncomfortable. And actually the best way of it going is just to leave it alone. And the more I prod it, the bigger it's going to get. And it's okay to feel this sensation in my body. It's not a threat to me. It's just a storm passing through the sky. It's just the human experience is to sometimes feel a bit iffy or really iffy. And we're trying to make our experience perfect all the time by smashing out these thoughts that feel terrible. And we're actually just playing quite a game of whack-a-mole, really, rather than actually understanding the nature of it. So now it's like, yeah, I can feel uncomfortable for a bit and just be like, yeah, I feel a bit angry, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do anything about it. Doesn't mean I need to fix it. I'm just being quite normal right now. So yeah, I really liked what Jen said earlier about, yeah, I'm uncomfortable, but that's okay. I'm going to crack on anyway. Doesn't need to be a big deal.
I think it's just nice when you start to see, because I thought it then means it doesn't dictate your life. Whereas before, my feeling would dictate my life and what I could and couldn't do and where I could and couldn't go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've been like, now I see that most of the time I feel bad because my true self is thinking differently about the situation. I'll be like, oh, I don't want to go to that event. I'll feel anxious. And the reason I feel bad is because my true self is going like, get over it, just go. It's fine, you know? So the way we feel isn't a true reflection of our true self a lot of the time. And I think we get very wrapped up in our thoughts and our feelings in the current moment are the absolute truth for us. And a lot of the time they're not.
Yeah, our true self is just love.
Yeah, exactly. And our true self doesn't feel anxious about going to a party.
No, wholeness. It doesn't see separation.
Yeah.
It doesn't see separation. This is why Buddhism and Hinduism was all about reconnecting, seeing past the ego, see past the ego, stop looking at the ego, stop looking at what we think, stop looking at the feelings, start to become inquisitive about who you are. And if you ever find it, you'll find it's love. The most inexplicable love and safety. It's wholesomeness, it's whole, it's home. People call it home. Yeah. That's it. And it's funny enough, it's pretty much just said what I've just written down. It's along the lines of every time we do suffer, it's like it's an invitation for us to, it is an invitation for us to start to see. It's an opportunity to reflect on how am I seeing this? What do I believe about this situation? You know, as long as we've believed that feelings are a reflection of circumstance, as it appears to, you know, because it's so quick, it happens like that happens, I feel like this, that fucking pissed me right off. Do you know what I mean? It's like, because it looks like that. I've mentioned this before, but seeing Archie fall into that, like I saw the first time I really saw it in Archie where his sister kicked his castle and he just went, "Mah!" First time. Normally he could take anything off Archie and he wasn't really bothered. But then all of a sudden he was like, Lewin, you bad boy, to his sister. Always called her a bad boy. I saw the first time that he kind of attributed his feeling to an external event. that happened, I feel like this. That makes me feel like that. I'm powerless. Now I'm scared because I'm powerless. There's all these people and places and things and situations that I'm powerless over, and they hold the key to my well-being. That's what this conversation is about, to say, no, it doesn't exist like that. That's beautiful. Thanks, Flick, love.
It might be quite subjective, and obviously, you know, there's various answers, but for me, I think just trust is quite important. And for sitting with difficult feelings, it's knowing that it's kind of my lack of trust often in a good outcome, which is actually sitting there waiting when everything is okay. You know, mistrust either in other people or in, you know, the universe and things working out. And that's often what causes the uncomfortable feeling. But just acknowledging that I'm actually just not trusting at the moment, and that can allow me to let that go a bit, I find.
Nice. I like that. It's the whole trust is earned thing, isn't it? So how do you earn trust in yourself? How do you earn trust in life? How does life earn trust? Hey?
By trusting. It's like, how do you do it? You just have to trust, and it's sitting with the feelings and just knowing and seeing a different outcome to what you expected in the first place. Like, you know, Jen with your mate and the card. It's like being able to trust that actually they're another human who is, you know, flawed and in maybe the same ways we are or not, and is just not thinking about it. You know, is probably thinking about it in a relative. There's probably going to be a positive outcome, basically. And yeah, nothing to mistrust in that situation.
I think that goes back from you just keep learning from your own experience. Like, you can see how many times we've got so caught up and it's looked so real, and then it's all right. And I think that's the thing, you start to learn from your own experience. Like, have I felt like this before? Yeah. Was everything fine? Yeah, everything was fine. And also sometimes when things happen in a way that we don't expect, we're still able to navigate it, even if it's uncomfortable. And you start seeing we have got everything we need to live our life. It's built into us to be able to live our life. And I think with that element of trust, and sometimes it's almost like blind trust, but it does exist. It does work out, and not always how we think it should, but it's, again, that subjective idea of whether it's worked out well or not. And there's I think it's a Chinese proverb or Chinese story about the man with the horse, and I don't know if you've heard it, but
yeah,
and I think that maybe it is, maybe it isn't, we'll see, kind of thing. Like, oh, this is terrible, and then something else happens. Oh, this is great. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, we'll see. And I think you start to recognize it's all subjective.
You know it, should I tell it?
Yeah, tell it, because I always get it wrong.
Okay, it's a Chinese proverb about, so there's a Chinese dude, and he has, let me get this right. So one day all of his horses run away, and all his neighbors are like, oh man, that sucks. Your horses have gone. And he's like, yeah, maybe not. And the next day they come back and they bring more horses with them. And his neighbors are like, wow, you're so lucky. That's so fortunate. And he's like, maybe not. And then the next day, his son gets on one of the new horses and he gets thrown off and breaks his leg. And guess what his neighbors say? Oh no, man, that sucks. You're so unfortunate. And he's like, maybe not. And then the next day, the army come to town and they want to get his son to join them. And he's like, I can't. I broke my leg riding a horse yesterday. And his neighbors go, oh, how fortunate you are. You won't lose your son in the war. He's like, maybe not. So I really like Jen's point earlier, because I think we've got to trust that sometimes things don't work out and bad things do happen and you have a really challenging time. But I think you're always okay. And like Jen said, you know, you'll always know what to do in the scenario. Like, you'll always find a way to be okay, and you'll be okay afterwards. Even if things don't go okay for a while, you will be okay. And we never really know, maybe not, which way it's going to roll.
I don't know, personally, I'll stand corrected, but I always feel like the challenging times are like growth catalysts.
Big time.
Yeah, and I think in that there's a value to it.
Yeah.
You know, and like you said there, Flick, big time. Yeah, big time. And you know, it is big time growth. The hard times are big time growth catalysts. And you know, ultimately, that's what we're all looking for. We are all looking for growth. We are all wanting to become more in tune with life, more in tune with ourselves, more in tune with experience. And the reason why we want to be like that is because it's more comfortable, because it's nicer, it's a more pleasant way to live. So it's like there is, you know, all the challenging times that we're all trying to escape from. And this isn't to say go and create challenging times for yourself by any means. Feel free if you want to, if that's what you want to do. But the things that ultimately we are most afraid of are our greatest gifts. It's like, it sounds very dramatic, but I used to say things like, I visited hell and I walked through the door and I found heaven. Because that's how it went. I went to hell and I found heaven through going to hell. So I think what I'm trying to say is when you take away the judgment from experience, from life, it's all one thing. You know, whether we're having a beautiful experience, a connected experience, a joyful experience, a mundane experience, a boredom experience, a sadness, a grief experience, a worrisome experience, an anxious experience, and a hellish experience. It's all experience. It's like a television screen, you could say. You know, a television screen can show any image it wishes. Your laptop can show any image it wishes, or you wish for it to show you. But it doesn't change the screen. It doesn't change the display. The display always exists. It's just what's showing up appears different. Sometimes we'll look at things on the screen, we'll go, I like that. Other things we're like, no, I don't like that swipe. But it's like, he's starting to get that sense of everything is perfect. Everything is ultimately perfect. There is no mistake. A mistake is a perspective of mind. It's a perspective of thought. It's like a problem. The problem is a perspective of thought. It doesn't look like a perspective of thought, but it is entirely a perspective of thought. Is a problem. It's not a thing. It's the same as a solution, like my sister started to say years ago. We are our own answers to our own questions. We are our own solutions to our own problems. It all starts and ends with the mind. Mind is the most powerful thing in the universe. It's what's created everything we're sat in now. It's what's created all of our technologies. All this information has come from somewhere. All the information throughout the ages and all the technologies that we have now have come from somewhere. They've come from somewhere. What else exists there? What other possibilities exist for both humanity en masse and for ourselves personally? It's like to start to question that is to start to open up our hearts. Is to start to drop old ideas and beliefs, to start to want to see something different. And all we need to do is just want to see something different. That's all it is. It's just to open ourselves up to say, I'd like to see something different. And in the moment we open up ourselves and say, I'd just like to see something different, we will start to see different. Because we're the ones in charge. We're the ones in control. Test it out. I want to see something around X or Y, whatever the hell it is. Test it out, put it out there. See what mind brings you back. See what consciousness brings you, what knowledge it brings you. It will bring you solutions. If you keep looking at a problem, that's all you're going to see. Problem. If we start to use this wisely, we start to open up our mind and start to consider that we can use it differently. You'll start to find solutions. You'll start to realize it is creative beyond how we currently understand creative to be. En masse again, there are people in this world who are fully aware and
Like we were sat at Windermere Lake the other day. What was that thing we saw? The hoverboard thing.
yeah, it was awesome, wasn't it?
And I was saying,
It's
like,
like a hydrofoil.
it looked like he was just floating on top of the, like about that high off the lake.
Yeah, so his board was here, the water's here, his board was there, above the water, like a foot above the water, and he's just
Floating.
flying along the lake, wasn't he?
And we were like, that would have been science fiction when we were kids. But the idea for it existed then, but it hadn't come to someone's mind. And we were just like sat looking like, wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think you see like how much change and new ideas have come to fruition in our lifetime. Like when I speak to my nieces and nephews, they've got no memory of a time without the internet. And like they were Googling stuff for school, and I was like, oh God, I used to have to go to the library and get books, and you had to have to carry books around with you. And they were like, what? That sounds rubbish. And they've got no memory of that time. And we're speaking to a little, I think he's about 7, and he said, oh, I can't remember. It doesn't really bother me. I can't remember going to the co-op when there wasn't a queue and I didn't have to wear a mask. And you can just see, like, for him, it's just, he's just very present, and it's just what it is. He can't remember the old. And you can see how, you know, it's that idea of wanting things to be different, or it used to be like that and I want it to still be like that, and then we'll suffer that. But it was cool just listening to him. But you see how everything exists within thought. Everything we're looking for is available to us, and we sometimes don't know to ask. And like I've started to have so much more respect and understanding of prayer. Why within every religion there's this a way of prayer, and I know that in there's a documentary called Oh My God, and they show one of the tribes in Africa. They connect to God or spirit or source and answer through jumping. I can't remember the name of them, and they showed that every single culture has a way to connect to this space or this source or a God or the energy. And we can kind of feel, I don't know, I feel like when we don't have necessary religion or philosophy in our lives, we can feel disconnected. But I've started to realize prayer is something so innate to us in terms of connecting to or asking for. Like you're saying, I would like to see something around this. Show me the way. And like I've been getting really interested in healing again, something I used to be interested in before the principles, and then kind of I started thinking I knew something about life and the principles was it, and I got really narrow-minded again.
Dogmatic.
Because it stabilized me. It took me from being someone who was so all over the place, and it stabilized me, and I needed that. But now I'm able to explore things I have no idea how this works or if it's true, but I'm interested in it. So we've been doing, like at the end of group last week, we just did 8 minutes where we're asking people either turn your cameras off or close your eyes and just send love out into the world. We did it for Lise last night with sending healing, and she's in Cumbria, we're in Essex, and then we've got 8 people all concentrating on Lisa, and she's getting experience and feeling within her body and sensation. And I'm like, this life stuff is so much bigger and so much more than my intellect can get its head around. But you see that at some point that might just be normal. And in some cultures, I think it already is a very normal thing. And I think that's the beauty. You see where limitation is, it's within our mind of what we think is possible. Because you only have to look into the world. We have gone beyond what we think is possible again and again and again. Like the fact there's a direct flight to Australia now. Like that wouldn't have been possible.
Or to the moon.
To the moon. But you see, like, so then when we then like make that smaller into our life, like the things we would like to have insight about or see, it's nothing to that intelligence. And I think that's where I've started to ask and have conversations in my mind with, I'd love to see more about this. The principles, I feel like, is this starting point to get you grounded. I always remember saying it was almost like that. There's something reliable here. There's a place always to look for the way in which the world is appearing to me. That's within me. That's coming from me. And knowing that, and knowing then you're connected to an infinite source of new thought, then it can always change. Then go and play and explore and learn. Like, I know I did become very dogmatic around the principles because it was something that it felt like it saved my life. But then I also know now there's so many people waking up and living incredible lives and having realizations, and they've never heard of the three principles. Because the three principles describes what we already are as beings. Like, it's not adding anything to us, it's telling us this is what you, this
And
is
it's
what
not
you're made of.
it's not limiting it to anything either.
Does anyone else have questions or comments or?
Yeah, I do. I love reading about all the the African tribes and Australian tribes and South American tribes, all the tribes people. Like you say, Jen, they are tapped into this kind of magic that we've kind of had a little bit squeezed out of us in a way. And I think one of the coolest things I ever read was about smoke signals in Australia and how they used to send a smoke signal out. And then the tribes people in the area, say there's an area and there's like 12 different tribes, they would all stop and they would listen. And they were using telepathy to communicate. But then they would all congregate around the giant tree on the flat plain as the sun set on the third day. You know, the message is heard. So yeah, the magic in this life is utterly incredible. Utterly incredible. They're unlimited. I was all,
Insane, Lisa.
hey?
Insane. That story is insane. It's really cool.
Yeah. And it's also the same way there was some elephants that one of the elephants got killed in a herd of elephants. And every single year on the same day, all of the elephants turn up at this place. And it's somewhere in Africa, I can't remember where it is. But, you know, there's way more to this life than meets the eye if we have eyes to be curious and investigate and research these things, because I know personally for myself what Adam was talking about before with the trust. These things open doors in our soul that allow us to trust all situations. And that's magic.
Another thing that I've noticed a lot is, like, recently I'm really not worried about people who have problems. Not because I don't care, but because with this understanding, I kind of fundamentally know they're okay and they'll figure it out. Because I don't want people to suffer, and I'll help if I can. But I'm not trying to fix them because I know that they're okay. So I don't feel responsible anymore.
Nice.
They have their own journey and their own knots to figure out, and they'll do that. And that's just part of why they're here. So it's a very freeing thing in that respect as well.
And that's one of the kindest things you can show somebody, Flip.
Yeah, that you know they're okay and they're not broken, or yeah.
That's one of the most, I think it was like Mackie said last week, I don't come out and I don't say too many really profound things.
Terrible.
It was bloody brilliant. And it's like, that's one of the most profound things you could say, that mate. It's just that statement of, I don't really have too much profound stuff to say. And the way you said it was so profound. It's like, I don't know, it seems counterintuitive to not. Lyle Rach, who once was a speaker on one of our retreats, she was a young girl in South Africa we met in Johannesburg, and she's suicidal, spent time on a psyche ward, and she tried to commit suicide, didn't she? And she told us about this class that she had about worry, and they were trying to raise awareness of people's suffering and in what's going on at the moment, and not in the moment as in COVID, but as in the way society is kind of trying to address mental illness. And in schools, that it's quite a hot topic. And she said everybody was saying, even my teacher was saying, one of the kindest things you can do for somebody who's suffering is to worry about them. She said, but that makes no sense. And she said, I was the only one who sat in that class and said, look, I don't worry about anybody anymore. I don't need to worry about them, but that leaves me more room to love them. And she said they didn't get it. And I get why somebody won't get that.
I think they were trying to say that if you worry, it shows that you care.
It shows you care.
And she was saying that's not true. You can show that you care in all kinds of ways. Worry is actually taking something away from you and isn't helpful.
Yeah. And so just, you can only know somebody's wholeness if you've seen it for yourself. And it's nice that Flick that you found that wholeness within yourself. You found that I don't need to worryness within yourself. And therefore you can see it in everybody else. And when the moment you meet somebody who's suffering with that point of view, just that knowing and just the way you interact with them from that point will be very, very different. And that helps them so much.
Yeah, I've noticed it. The conversations feel very different when you come from that place of you're just like, yeah, that sounds tough, but you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You are not this experience.
Yeah, because if you come from a place of worry versus love, you might not act any differently. Just because you're coming from a place of love, it doesn't mean you're not going to be proactive, and your intuition won't not signal that you should do something. I'd rather act proactively to help from a place of love than because I'm worried and I'm anxious and I need to fix things. And I think often that people fix because they're worried because they want to feel better themselves rather than the other person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been cool this week. So I've hung out with one of my friends I've not hung out with much for quite a long time, and it's actually been a really good time for me to be able to go for this. Like we spent like this 5 hours on this walk, and she messaged me later and she said, "There's something about sharing with you that I feel lighter afterwards." And she shared all kinds of stuff with me, but it's not. The situation isn't nice, but I'm also kind of excited because she's waking up to something, and I can see that there's learning, and all she needs for me to do is listen and to love her, and she doesn't need my opinion or even guidance. It was really nice. And there's been other times where it has been, I have shared an opinion, but this particular time I've realized all she's needed was to be heard and for me to listen. And I know that before having any understanding of this, if someone had come to me with those kind of things, I'd be really worried and get in there with them and be worried with them. And it's so nice when you don't have to do that, and then there's just more of you available to them. Bless you.
Thank you.
It's a much more polite sneeze. My dad's like two rooms away, and every time he sneezes I can hear him. Paul, have you got anything unprofound to say?
So the thing that I've had, especially today, sorry, I'm shouting, I'm being told off. So really kind of catching things early, that I don't have to be, that life can be like the moment, living in the moment. I can be anything. So luckily I was on the phone with Claire today, lunchtime. I'd left the building site I was on to go and get some dinner, and I was pissed off with someone on site. Someone had just done something quite minor, but I found myself immediately like full of hell, and went left side, started walking off. I was speaking to Claire, and I caught a reflection of myself in a pub window, and I went, I've got a right swagger on here. I went, someone's going to fucking get it. And then, as I said it to Claire, I then just laughed at myself and went, I don't know why I'm doing that. I went, there's nothing anyone's just done there that now makes me need to go out and enforce something on someone. And I just started laughing about it. And it was like, wow, that's really quite nice. That's really quite a sweet, endearing thing for myself, not to have to put myself through that same typical pattern, routine, pre-programmed shit. I can't just laugh about it. So to laugh at myself losing my temper because I caught myself swaggering in a reflection. Yeah, I don't need to go there. They're not going to, the site's not going to benefit from it. I'm not going to benefit from it. Just drop it. And it was just quite nice just to have that little realization, like while I'm chatting to Claire, that there's a conversation going on in my head, and it just went instantly. It was just like, wow, that's nice. That's a real. It's a real point to remember about living in the moment, and that you can be whatever you want to be. It is endless. So yeah, that's as profound as I'm going to be. And Dave, loved your accent.
Thanks, mate.
You were verging more towards Geordie than Macklem.
I know, I got a bit scared.
Too much of that, like, but you were getting there. You're getting there.
I got a bit scared when it started going a bit Geordie. Oh, I'm going to hold right off. How nice is that, though, buddy? It's like you can have the experience. You can have the experience, and you can catch yourself before you end up going too far down a path. I know for the likes of yourself and for myself, our characters that we've been in the past, that's a really useful thing to be able to do. That's a really useful thing to be able to do. I'm eternally grateful for that, to catch myself and go, what are you doing? You don't need to do that. I think that's awesome, fella. And it's, you know, it's proof as well that once you, I had a chat with Paul not so long ago, and I said, you do know you'll never go back to who you were. You can't. But once you've started to shift, you will never go back to who you were. It's impossible. You consciousness doesn't go backwards. It doesn't. It fluctuates, but you fundamentally, once you become aware, you've become aware, and once you become aware, there's nothing that can take that away from you. You can forget, but you within you, you know. Because I know it was quite a terrifying thing for me that one day I really kind of lost my rag for the first time, and then I thought, oh, I must be going back to how I used to be, and then very quickly I was out of it, and I'm like, well, that's not how I used to be, because normally if I lost my rag, I'd be like that all day. I'd be a miserable bastard for the full day. And now I'm out of it. I'm feeling all right. I'm buoyant again. I'm happy. I'm not bothered. I'm not carrying that around with me anymore. And you realize, like, one of the characteristics of this is you go in and out of experiences so much quicker. You don't hold on to them. I think that's such a beautiful thing. I love that, man.
Yeah, I just realized it's realizing how limiting your life is if you choose to hold on to who you've been or who you think you should be.
Yes.
So today, I would have, in the past, I would have lost my temper, said something, done something, smashed something, regretted it, punched something, and to realize that I don't have to do anything. There's a choice. I can choose to lose my temper, strut halfway up the street, catch a reflection and laugh about it. I can choose to make nothing of it whatsoever. I can choose to, there's choices. Whereas in the past for me, there was a life, it was just a life led of me fighting through life, because I had to respond to everything in a certain way. And now I don't. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
And I think as a fella, it can seem almost like giving up your manhood. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it can almost seem like our strength is tied into our ability to intimidate and things. And I think
Yeah.
bringing it back to that, you know, you're 6'6", you're an intimidating looking fellow. When you stood next to you, you're a big lad like, and when you crack that smile and your face lights up with a smile, it filled the room. Do you know what I mean? And that love that you get when you stood next to you, that kind of loving presence that you get when you stood next to you, is so powerful. It's such a powerful experience. And it's like, I don't know, as a blokey bloke, it can almost seem like it's us being soft, but us being soft is actually us being strong. We're more, I don't know, I feel there's more power in love, there's more power in connection than there is in separation, because connection is the truest state of being. It's more real, it's more true. The separation's the illusion. The thing to fear is the illusion. Yeah, I like seeing big burly fellas emanating love. It's a beautiful thing. And I think it gives permission for other fellas to drop their bullshit. It's like your mum said one time, why do we put on masks to meet the masks of others? I think we mentioned that last week. We mentioned it recently at some point. But it's like when you take your mask off, it allows other people to take their mask off, and you just get to meet an individual, you get to meet a person. You don't meet a character, you don't meet a facade. What's it called? A laminate. You don't meet a laminate. You know, you peel away the laminate and you see the actual beautiful wood underneath it all. You know, why do you cover that up with a laminate? I think that's a nice thing. There's beauty in absolutely everybody. We perhaps won't see it all the time, but there is. Em, how are you? Do you want to share out, love, or
No?
No, cool.
Just know how to put it into words.
I haven't read any of that.
I think kind of a bit like when you told the story last week about when Alex tried to rob you in South Africa, and initially your response would have been, if someone asked you, if someone tried to rob you, what would you do? It'd be to kick the shit out of them and get away. But for whatever reason, that's not what occurred to you. Like, you put your arm around him, you got to know him, and like you say, that's not what you should always do in those situations, because like we've seen people out in South Africa who were on tick and you knew you just needed to get away from them. But in that situation, and I think like you got to see that in the past you would have beaten up a man who was desperate, who had a young baby and actually just needed help. But it's because you dropped that facade of who you thought you had to be, and you get present. And human beings are really like creative and useful in the present moment. When we find ourselves present is when we are the most helpful, creative, intelligent human beings. When we're living out the story of who we think we're supposed to be is when we're not present, because we're living out of something stale and old. And I think it sounds like today Paul just got to see and suddenly get present when he saw his own swag and just stop. And you know, people do things that make no sense to us because it makes sense to them given how they think. So you start to you realize, well, sometimes I do things which piss other people off because it made sense to me, and you just let people off the hook a bit more. Or you have a conversation and it's just, you start to realize we're all doing the same thing. That person on the site today that did whatever they did was living out of their thought experience and doing what makes sense to them. And their reality is just as real to them as yours is to you. And you start to the more you start to see that, you can't help but feel more compassion and less judgment. It's the movement and the direction of understanding this is towards all of those qualities in life that we know are good: compassion, love, non-judgment, forgiveness. But they're all good ideas until we get to have an experience of them. But when you start to see the logic of experience, then it would only make sense to have understanding for other people. Because I know that when I act out, I'm scared, or I'm fearful, or I'm anxious, and I act in ways that I'm not proud of. But that was all I could see in that moment. There wasn't anything else available to me. And so then I get to see that in other people on kind of big scale and small scale in my own life. And then you get to experience the feeling of compassion and love rather than judgment and righteousness. So it's not only then the way that you then respond will be different in the world and the consequences are different, you also get to live in that feeling. And I know that's something that Elsie Spittle often says to people: what feeling do you want to live in? Do you want to live in judgment, or do you want to live in your well-being? Do you want to live in hate, or do you want to live in your well-being? And to her, it seems it's that simple. Like, where do you want to live? And I noticed when we did the retreat and she had that question, and she wasn't at all rude to the lady, but she just stopped her dead, like, yeah, but this is all a story. Where do you want to live? Do you want to live in the story of that, or do you want to live here present in your well-being? Because the well-being is always available. It's what's innate to us all. And then we see, well, what is it that moves us away from that? It's going to be beliefs, ideas, characters, who we think we are, who we think other people are, how the world should be. So you can see that by starting to recognize what beliefs and ideas are built from, they become a little bit more, what's the word you used last week, malleable. Like, you start to realize, oh, actually, they're not as fixed as I thought. I could see in a different way. I can find understanding for people. Like, I've loved having conversations with my mum about some of the politicians recently. I'm like, do you think you could find it in your heart to love them too? And she's like, no, I don't think I can. So cool, fair enough right now. But I can see that she's having the lived experience of that in real time. And I think that's why that Buju Buju quote has meant so much to me. It's like, can you love when everything's pressing you to be less? Because it can seem like there's so many convincing things that get in the way of it, and justified things. I remember Keith saying to me, the justified negativity, that's a beautiful one to see through or something. And he talked a bit around it, and I remember thinking, wow, how many times have I felt so justifiably negative towards someone or something? But it's like your feelings become this incredible indicator, not of the world, not of the truth of something, but of your mind. So then when we get reflective, you can realign again, you can readjust. And I think that's something that with the principle seems to just, it's not something we have to do, it's something that just naturally keeps happening. You keep realigning. It's almost like it does the work for you. Because I know I used to effort at trying to be grateful for things or trying to see the innocence in people, and it really didn't work because it was just good ideas. But when you see the logic of the innocence of people, then it's not something you do, it's just something that you see.
What the hell did we talk about before we started eating Buju Buju?
I don't know.
We had no. God, Buju Buju, we'd have nothing to talk about each week. Anybody else? Heidi, how are you tonight, love?
Sleep.
Hiding. there's more and more people on the planet waking up to this kind of thing. You know, we can look at technology as a curse, or it's got its pros, it's got its cons. But it seems like since we've discovered wireless internet and discovered how to create laptops, more and more people have got access to mind-opening conversation from all kinds of beautiful teachers all around the world, from all different modalities, and people listen to what resonates for them. I think it's a really beautiful thing. This is taking place all over the world right now. People have started it. I'm so thankful to the internet. It was after I watched Sydney Banks on YouTube that I went for a walk and I woke up. If it wasn't for the internet, I don't know what would have happened. But I think it's a really beautiful time we're actually in right now. We're in the beginning, it appears, of a big awakening to humanity, where humanity is starting to get interested in more.
Is it okay for Em to share something quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, Em,
Yeah.
if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi everyone. Hi. So I've just linked in quite late. Hi, yeah, you all right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
So I've only linked into the latter part, but I'm really enjoying sort of the whole conversation around love, really, and what Jen just said. I can't remember exactly the words, but so I had an experience on the weekend. As Dave and Paul know, I've been sort of having some sort of issues with my son. Well, he has. And he spoke to Dave a few times, and Paul and Dave together. And the last time Dave sent me a message after, because of course I like to check in and say, you know, how did Mason get on and did he get much out of the session? And Dave sort of said something along the lines of sort of passing it back to me, like maybe there's something you've got to learn from this as well. And in that moment, I was a bit like, what? What do you mean I've got to learn something? Because like, I thought I wasn't involved, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And I thought I was doing the best as his mum to get him some support with Dave and a space that he could open up. So since then, Mason's had some quite tricky moments, and we were in the hospital A&E on Saturday night because he tried committing suicide. So he proceeded, I mean, it's all story what actually happened, the lead up to it, but he tried sort of putting a belt around his neck and hanging himself, and then he took a load of tablets, and it was really surreal, like what I learned from that, because I can't really put it into words, but my eldest daughter was in the house as well, and she was literally going almost like hysterical. And it's sort of like I saw it from a like I wasn't in my head about it, if that makes sense. I wasn't sort of saying, oh, you know, I've done a bad job as a mum, and my God, I can't believe he's doing this. And like, I wasn't trying to fix the situation. I just calmly, I was really sort of like, really calm. And even when the ambulance and everything sort of came, even I think they thought I'd like lost the plot, because even the ambulance person took me aside and was like, you know, you okay? You know, you okay, Emma? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine, yeah. You know, and he's like, well, no, you know, this process, you're going to have to get him to hospital. And it was just really odd, because I was like looking in on it, you know, like, but really calm, because I was aware of all my thoughts doing overtime, and all this stuff was going on in my head, like, but it was in the background. But like Jen just said, when you're not caught up, you can really be like really productive and do what needs to be done. and I sort of felt a really overwhelming sort of, when I was in the hospital with Mason, we was just waiting for doctors, and it was a really long, hot, you know, slog. It was like 24 hours of just waiting and people speaking to him, and all the doctors were obviously like, you know, that they were sort of labeling him really as sort of like had aggression issues, and he was suicidal, and he was this and he was that. And normally, again, I'd really be into my head about that, because in my head, he's not broken. He has everything he needs within him. And I just, you know, I just want to expose that sort of thing for him to understand for himself. But I don't know, I just wanted to share that, like the whole experience of it was really different to how it could have been. Do you know what I mean? So since coming across the principles, I saw the principles in me, like completely showing up, how we can really get entangled in our minds in these sort of tricky situations, really. That's sort of really all I wanted to say, really.
Thanks, Em.
That's right.
No, thanks, Em. How's he doing now?
Well, when we was in the hospital, we had like literally like 10 hours just in a room, just me and him. And I didn't say anything. We just didn't speak. It was like really, I don't know, it's just that space, like holding that space of like love. It was really bizarre, because he immediately had a lot of shit going on in his head, you know, a lot of, you know, guilt, what he'd put us through, what he'd put himself through, you know, things like that. And I think he had a sort of small insight, because he sort of said, you know, all of this is coming from me, isn't it? It's not like actually, because he was putting it down to that he hated where he lived, and he hated because he had no friends, and he hated this and he hated that. And yeah, I think he's definitely sort of not so angry, because he recognizes there's something that he recognized, that when he has a thought, he then adds loads more to it, like, you know, like my mum passing in November. He's got a lot of anger about that, and he says the only emotion he knows is anger or numb. There's nothing else. So every emotion, even when he's nervous, he's angry, he comes across angry. Do you know what I mean? Because he can't control the feelings, he says. You know, he doesn't, it's sort of that regulating, you know, just embracing them all, you know what I mean? So I sort of used a metaphor as a bit like a snowball. So when you have that thought, you have a little snowball, and then you roll it sort of thing. And he sort of recognized that. But yeah, he's been better. Yeah, he's been better. I mean, that's all I can say, really. He's had a crap day today. He was better Monday. He's been a bit more open, talking about how he feels and his thoughts and stuff like that. Today's been a shit day. So I've just left him be, really. I've just asked him if he's okay, and he's just sort of been in his bedroom listening to music. So he's processing it his own way, really. Yeah, and that's what I tend to do, really, now. But it was just funny how my daughter was hysterical when it was all going on, and going to me, you know, you're fucking, there's something wrong with you, you know, you're his mum, you should be doing this and doing that. Like, it's expectation that I should be doing, like, losing my shit. Do you know what I mean? But I felt really just all right about it. That sounds really bizarre. I don't mean that. People must think I'm weird. I don't mean I was all right about it. What I mean is I knew it was okay. Do you know what I mean?
There was like a peaceful acceptance.
Yeah. And a not like the impersonal part of it all, not the personal. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
It sounded to me like you were describing, you could just see the objective nature of things without the judgment, almost.
Yeah. And I
It's a
could
good
only really share that in this type of conversation, because I think if I said that to like my sister or whatever, I think they'd probably think I've lost my shit. I think they'd think I was like, I had a nervous breakdown or something. Because they just, you know, I mean, even when we was in the hospital and my sister was like, "Oh, how is he? How is he? Like, you know, are they gonna section him?" And I was like, "No, why the fuck would they section him?" He's like, he doesn't have these thoughts. He doesn't have thoughts of suicide when he's in a peaceful state of mind. Do you know what I mean? It's like when he's angry, it's like overloading. His brain's just overloaded. Like, and that's how he explains it. He says his brain feels like it's going to explode. So that's the only option in his brain at the moment. That was the thought that come in that moment. So when CAMS were talking to him, they were saying, you know, is it premeditated? Do you hear voices and all this? And I was like, and he was looking at me as if you know, they had two heads. And he was like, voices? No, I hear my own voice. I hear my own thoughts. I don't hear someone else's. And they said, yeah, but do you think about it all the time? And he said, no, it's when I'm angry, I can't cope. I feel like I can't cope. So that's why I wanted to kill myself, because I want it to go. I want my thinking to go, you know, and yeah, so it just goes to show how it does affect people. Do you know what I mean? When they're like caught up in thought, really.
Bless him.
Yeah. Yeah. I just sort of like, where for weeks and weeks I've been very much getting caught up in the story, so to speak. And when you said that to me in the message, it was a bit like, no way am I doing that. What have I got to learn, really? But actually I had a lot to learn. And that moment come on that pinnacle point that I realised I did, you know, I was getting caught up. And I think that's a natural thing as a parent, you know, when you love someone. I just think it's the sneaky part. It just catches up with you without you knowing.
Yeah.
That you think you're not getting into the story, but actually I was probably feeding it, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting. You weren't on for the beginning, but we talked a bit about, you know, the hardest times that we come across in our life are often our greatest gifts when it comes to learning.
Yeah.
And I think it's another beautiful example of, if somebody was to ask you, how would you be if Mace was to stick a belt around his neck and take a lot of pills? I'd be beside myself. Surely I'd be beside myself.
Yeah.
And I think it was Adam said it before, the imagined future is 99.999999% of the time far worse than the reality of what actually does take place. And I think it's one of those things where you can start to learn from those situations, and you can start to understand that you can have something, probably digressing a little bit, but you can have something that is going to take place in the future that we are worried about. But we can know it's going to take place, but the one thing that we cannot account for is what will our experience of it actually be in that moment. You know, that's the one thing, and that's the one thing we're ultimately worrying about. What is our experience of it actually going to be like? And you've just pretty much described the fact that you will never know what your experience of that event will be until it shows up. And I think when people start to see that, it takes an awful lot of their mind. Thanks so much for sharing that, love.
That's right. As I say, I mean, in less than 3.5 months, I've like had 2 life experiences. I've had that, and then obviously losing my mum. So it's like double whammy, but both were very just peaceful. I mean, I could just see how my thoughts were just flicking in and out. I was like the observer. It was really bizarre. Like driving to hospital, he was saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I was like, "Yes," and I was a bit like in my head, like pissed off, so to speak, like angry. Do you know what I mean? And then I had a lot of guilt about being a mum, but I didn't obviously voice those out. But I was observing all this shit, like it was going on. It was like, God, this is really interesting. Now it's all like all these thoughts are just coming in and out, and it just means nothing. Do you know what I mean? Then I'd just like feel really peaceful, and then I would feel bad because I felt peaceful. It's like, oh my God, bizarre. Sure.
I think that's called presence.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, I'll just say one more thing that was quite funny today, that when I was walking the dogs, I was having just a lovely, lovely walk, you know, out in nature. It's beautiful. And it was really funny. I saw a magpie, and I don't know whether anyone else is familiar with the saying, like 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. And it was so freaking funny. I saw one and I was having this really lovely moment. And I saw this one magpie and I was like, for fuck's sake, something bad's going to happen today. Oh my God. And my head's playing overtime. And I'm like, come on, where's the second one? Because that's joy. Where's the second one? And then the second one flew over. I was like, oh, thank God. Yeah, that's right. I'm all right now. And then I started cracking up laughing. It's like, Emma, you idiot. Like, it's not real. That's just made up, that stupid
Wait,
saying. But my head was playing. I honestly, like, I had a shitty feeling when I thought it was 1 and I was going to have this bad news. And then the minute 2, I was like, oh, that's right. I can go on my walk now. And I was like, you bloody idiot. You fell into it again.
I feel sorry, but you see what we do.
I know, it's so easy.
It's just beautiful, just more and more beautiful examples of how we drive ourselves mad with our own mind.
God, yeah.
And we blame it on
And
the
I
pure blood.
And I think that's what Mason's slowly seeing. Do you know what I mean? Like just getting a little snippet of it. Oh, right. So this is interesting. Do you know what I mean? How when that seed gets planted, how it snowballs into, well, to a point that he, you know, wanted to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
All right, Em. Thanks, lovely. It's a mad old game of life. Mark,
You're still live?
you're still alive.
God, stop it.
Was that really all you were going to say?
Yes. Now on that, is it? No.
I'll listen for you.
Thanks, love. Harder. Oh, thank you.
Neville Goddard. You know that, you know, when I was talking and I was saying I couldn't remember that when I said about that, God is your imagination, and I couldn't remember. I was talking to it and I was saying that God is your imagination.
Yeah.
I'd heard it somewhere and I couldn't remember it was Neville Goddard.
Neville Goddard.
Yeah, I've texted it to you.
Oh,
Look it
yeah.
up. It's good. Same thing as Sid, but like years and years before him.
Right.
Mm.
So Einstein said the judge of intelligence is not knowledge, it's imagination. Or the measure of intelligence is not knowledge, it's imagination. That was Einstein's thing.
You've got to imagine everything first before you can do it.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it, would you?
No, that's where it all
All
starts.
imagination.
Cheers, dude. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for making it.
Do you want to do a minute or?
Turning on. What do you want
So we're
to do?
going to do 8, but because of the time.
Yeah, do it if you want.
We were going to do 8 minutes like we did last week, but we're just going to do 1 minute where we get really quiet and just send love into the world. So if you'd like to join us, please do. If you need to go,
Should I set a timer?
Yeah. Otherwise, I have to count to 60 in my head and then.
Okay.
I'll try to do it on my phone.
That's right, I've got it.
Rusty has probably been the best behaved he's been on a community group
Unbelievable.
for probably years. This is him. He's sat. I don't know if you can make it at work. There he is.
No,
He's been on 2 walks today though, so we thought maybe that he's just exhausted.
So what were you wanting to do?
Just sending some love out into the world.
And love to Mason as well. And to Em. That was a minute. It's very quick, wasn't it?
Much quicker than when I'm doing plank.
Much quicker than 8 minutes. Eight times quicker, in fact.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And if you're available, we're same time next week.
It's a love.
Guys, love you, Lise. Love you, Hardy.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks very much.
Guys, take care.
Bye.
Bye, Flick.
Bye.
See you, darling.
Yeah. Love you, Cal.
Oh, there she is. Bye, Flick. See you. See you soon.
Maybe
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah. Well, virtually, darling.
on the line. Okay.
You're looking
bye-bye.
cool. You match your bed breast.
I've got some
I
Easter
tried.
eggs for
I
you.
tried to coordinate.
Yeah, it's cool.
I thought it was a squash court. Looks
Huh?
like a squash court. It looks like you're in a squash court.
It's like a 4-poster,
Yeah.
like red rails. It's really cool.
Mm.
It's like,
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Oh, because it's full poster.
That's what she said.
Poster bed.
poster. Yeah.
Only in the Hardingham house.
A red full poster.
It's in her house, not ours.
Not here. We ain't got a full poster. Lovely.
Nice.
Thanks for tonight.
Lovely.
bless.
Sorry we're late, but we've had a big day. Mhm.
No, thanks for joining us. You know, we love having you on. We love it.
Yeah.
Don't contribute much.
Get the other 3
So
girls.
nice.
on, That would be hilarious.
At least I didn't go to sleep this time.
We take it as a compliment that you're so relaxed.
Yeah, that's how we take it.
Yeah.
You're just exhausted, Jenny. Just exhausted.
It's when I start snoring you need to worry.
We're in the fortunate position we can just click a button and turn you off.
Yes, I'm gone.
We're sad for.
Is that what you did with Rusty? He was very. I forgot about him.
Mm.
Amazing.
He's tired, I think.
He's snoring.
Aw.
Mm.
Look at him.
Was that him making those noises?
What time is it?
Go away. Leave it alone.
What's that?
Hilarious. All right, guys, I need to eat dinner. Good
Right,
night.
love you all.
You need some
Okay,
rest
guys.
too.
Thanks
God
again.
bless. Take
See you
care,
again.
everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Flick.
Bye-bye.
Hey guys.
Hey, mate, how are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Good lad.
How's it? You're in Essex.
Yeah.
All right. How long you been there?
Hang on.